Yo, call me a Super Saiyan 4, I'm gonna settle a score, and then I'm gonna call you a ho. You thought I was gonna say it. Hey, everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the Games Cage. Today, and only today, we are here, that's right, to do the Nintendo Switch Direct 2 predictions. I figured now that we are basically about in the less than 10 days range, it's given enough time for rumors without things starting to leak that I figured I would go ahead and give you my final hopes and predictions for the big day, bro. So, and for those of you that don't know, I'm going to be streaming that day on twitch.tv/gamescage, 24-hour stream leading up to it. So look forward to that. And of course, if you're enjoying the content here on YouTube, please consider subscribing to your boy, supporting the content. We're about to hit 70K subs, and I'm really hyper, and I'm really excited. So thank you guys all for the love and support lately. And let's just lock the in. And also become a YouTube member. It's only $3. You get access to, like, you know, a weekly video. So lock in. All right, but Nintendo Switch about to end its life and enter a new era with the Nintendo Switch 2. Now let's start with the most obvious thing, right? Which is length, right? How long is the Switch 2 presentation going to be? I'm realistically predicting, since they're still framing it as a direct, that it's probably going to be about 45 minutes to an hour. I am leaning towards this one being an hour long because they probably have a lot to talk about beyond just games. You know, think about Nintendo Direct. It's mainly just the gaming stuff, but for this one, they're probably going to want to talk about a lot of hardware and the software. And starting with hardware, let's start with the first and easiest prediction, and that is going to be the price, right? What is the price and release date of the Switch 2? Now, there's been some analysts at Bloomberg that recently had a report saying that, one, this is going to be the biggest launch in console history, which sounds kind of crazy, and that it's probably going to eye around 400, right? So I'm kind of in agreement with that. I think, you know, the $400 to $450 range is probably like a really high price for Nintendo. I think 400 is perfect because you think about this, right? You're already spending $400. You're probably going to want to buy a game or two at launch. They're definitely going to try to sell you a controller, extra stuff. Like, you're looking already by day one, you know, purchased by a lot of people, basically a $500, you know, price purchase. So I really do think like a $400 price point feels like the perfect spot for them to go, right? And in terms of a release date, I think they're just gonna do what they did with the first presentation, right? They had that presentation in January and then boom, released in March. And I think we're about to see a similar situation where we might see this by last week of May, first week of June. I'm really leaning on that territory, right? Where it's really gonna be, all right, May 30th might be the big shocker, or they might be like, you know, June 14th, June 15th, around that time frame, right? You wanna do it around summertime, people start to get out of school and stuff. They're doing that whole thing where they're doing the tour worldwide with the Switch experience that's going to run until May. So it makes sense you want to get some hands-on with people before selling it. But yeah, I'm leaning towards end of May, early June for the release date. Of course, right, before we get into the hype stuff, which is the games, they're probably gonna want to talk a lot about the hardware, right? You know, this is a new machine. Obviously, we like the Switch as it is, and we've seen the Switch 2, right? It's a bigger, better looking Switch, but we need to know a bit more of the in and outs, right? We are still speculating, and there's a lot of chip leaks and all that about what it can do, but it's leaning towards the fact that when you dock it, it's gonna be able to do at least 4K. Here's my hope, is that I know 4K is a lot to ask, which is why I'm hoping that maybe at the very least 1440p, right? If they can achieve, you know, that nice 1440p crisp look on a TV, right, or a monitor, you know, and then in handheld mode, just have this thing running at least 1080 permanently, I'd be happy with that, because, you know, some games in handheld mode just like look worse, right? It'd be nice if finally like the handheld experience was paired with the TV experience. It's unfortunate that we're probably gonna lose the OLED, right, as a look, you know, because I've fallen in love with my Switch OLED. Just the screen is so pretty, and so to not have that is just, oh, it's so upsetting. It's not fair. But alas, obviously, you know, we might lose that, but we're gonna get a better looking screen and experience. So as long as docked is able to at least, you know, upscale to 4K or do 1440p, I think that's more than enough. But I think most importantly, are we gonna see Nintendo games enter that era of, hey, choosing performance mode or choosing graphics mode? I almost hope not. I know third parties are always going to do that, but I feel like Nintendo should be confident in what they make and do, that they can make something that looks good enough and runs like perfect, right? Perfect thing about the Switch, right, was that it used to run games really well, but really early on in the Switch's life, you already noticed you weren't getting Nintendo games running at 60 when like that always felt like the staple for Nintendo, right? That when you bought Nintendo games, even up to the GameCube era, those motherfuckers were running at 60 FPS, or even Wii games, right? Like your Galaxies or your Donkey Kong Countries were running at 60 FPS. And so now being at that weird point with the Switch One where like, you know, Bowser's Fury was struggling to run 30 when you got, you know, to the moments where Bowser lands on the planet, to Tears of the Kingdom, you know, barely running 30, to a lot of even Kirby, you know, Forgotten Land is basically a 30 FPS game. Like it's a struggle, right? It is a struggle for the most part over here. And so that's the frustrating thing that I hope they solve with Switch 2, right? And something that I think they're going to address first and foremost, because I think this is going to be something that will probably be the most controversial discussed things about the Direct, and I think this is going to happen, is Nintendo is going to announce a 4K upgrade program for their older games, right? So they're probably going to want to, because think about this, right? They're probably going to want to sell Breath of the Wild again, or sell all these games, you know, like I think inherently your base Switch 1 games will like run a bit better on, you know, Switch 2, kind of like how when you played PS4 games on PS5, sometimes the loading screens are just inherently faster, or they run a bit better because the FPS is unlocked. I think there's going to be games that are like that, but I think there are games where like, you know, you could definitely give them a bit of an uplift, a bit of a new, you know, upgraded look and everything. And I think Nintendo is going to enter that territory, right? Kind of like how PlayStation, you know, remastered Last of Us or remastered Horizon or Spider-Man, and it was like a $10, $20 upgrade. But I think what Nintendo's going to do is, yes, they will offer you a $10 to $20 upgrade, or you're going to be able to subscribe to a third tier of Nintendo Online that's going to give you access to another virtual console, as well as 4K upgrades for games as they roll out. And I think it's going to be a rolled out program. I don't think day one you're gonna have access to, you know, Breath of the Wild remastered, Mario Odyssey remastered. I think actually those two will be remastered, but I think as months go on, you'll see like, all right, Kirby Forgotten Land, you know, 4K upgrade, right, will be available, $10 upgrade, or if you're part of the third tier of Nintendo Switch Online, boom, you'll have it for free, right? I think that's how they're going to sell a third tier of Nintendo Switch Online and kind of get away with it. And again, to be honest with you, I know a lot of people don't like, you know, the idea in general already of paying online. It's becoming a bit of an archaic point just because PC gaming is bigger. Why are you paying for online? But hey, man, it's the standard, right? And I think this would be at the very least a good way to, like, I don't know, I could see a world where I can justify having a better online, you know, hopefully Nintendo's going to have better online servers. I mean, look, dude, they're about to sell us a new Mario Kart with 24 player online. So Nintendo's got to have some confidence in their online. I still think Nintendo's Nintendo, and it's never going to be, you know, up to par with what we expect or what we want from a real online. But I do at the very least think they've made upgrades to their online infrastructure so that they can support, you know, 24 players in Mario Kart and hopefully some better battle royales and all this stuff, right? So that's my one big like hot take. First thing I think they're gonna do is that upgrade program that you could opt in on online, or, you know, potentially just pay. If you just want to pay for Breath of the Wild remastered, you can have that. But I do think like inherently games will at least look and run better, right? Nintendo's probably also gonna want to detail the mouse cons, right? We obviously saw in the first trailer, you know, they show like the Joy-Con sliding on the table. We know that they patented the mouse con feature, and this is going to be probably a really big deal for a lot of like PC-like games ported to console, right? Which will be fun. Like I'm sure a game like, you know, Baldur's Gate will benefit from it. I'm sure Nintendo will have some Gimmick games that are going to be using it, right? So they'll want to, you know, have that mouse feature. They'll probably maybe announce that you could finally use an actual browser on the Switch. It'll be nicer, even like browsing the eShop maybe and scrolling. I don't know. Knowing Nintendo, we think of the basic ways of the mouse con, but they're going to find some psycho weird thing, right? They're going to find some psycho gimmick to use for certain games or ideas ideas. I don't think anything too crazy of the mouse con thing. It's gonna be like every Nintendo gimmick where like the first few games support it. It'll always have some kind of support, but it's never gonna be like the standard way you play a new game. I do hope at the very least for the UI and internals that things change a little bit, right? Because for now, I understand the Switch UI has always been meant to be simple, right? And you guys know that's always meant to be, you know, simple and you just get to your games. But I would like something like the 3DS, you know, where you could show more icons on the main screen. Please let me have themes, bro. I'm begging you. Like, I know at the end of the day, themes don't matter that much, but they're cool. They're fun. I mean, we live in an era where we all have digital libraries. And so it would be cool if we can all show off our digital libraries in a way that's more suitable to us. You know, my digital library looks better than someone else's. So I would like a bit of that Nintendo charm. And now that we're potentially going to have better hardware, right, they'll be able to have at least themes and have it maybe not slow down your UI or something. So I'm hoping for UI improvements. Obviously, the eShop is a big one. We always talk about, right, how like the eShop runs like shit now. And because it runs on a browser, right, you see like basically the more games are on it, the more it runs like shit. So hopefully we'll have an actually internal store in there and obvious improvements just in general to the user experience and all that. But what is a Nintendo console and a Nintendo Direct without video games? And let's start with the first party lineup of Nintendo Switch. Now, here's the thing, right? I know Nintendo people, you know, always put their expectations crazy, and I have high expectations, but Nintendo's gonna do other Directs throughout the year, right? So I don't think they have to, and they're always gonna do Directs. So I don't think they have to go here and show their entire first party lineup for the next, you know, 3 years. I think it is going to be like the Switch one, where they basically show the lineup of games coming out for year one, right? They're going to be like, hey, from now up to holiday season, this will be what you are going to be, you know, expecting and probably going to buy, right? And then, you know, when they do a summer direct or a fall direct or whatever, they'll probably, you know, up the ante. But let's start with the biggest first party game they are going to talk about and focus on, and that is the next Mario Kart, right? That's obviously going to be the big one. I'm pretty sure at this point it's locked in that that's the big, you know, launch game. I really don't think you can get bigger than Mario Kart for a launch game. I mean, you saw Mario Kart 8 on Switch sold like 60 million copies. If you combine that with the Wii U sales, the game's at like 75 million copies. Like, Mario Kart is a killer, right? An absolute murderer. And I feel like that's how you sell, you know, the Switch day one, is you put Mario Kart on there, boom, mic drop. Now, what's the gimmick gonna be? I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit. I just don't know yet, right? The most hint we have is that little, like, you know, yellow question block that's near that gas station at the end of that first trailer for it, you know, potentially being a new type of boost. But I do hope, my biggest hope for Mario Kart, whatever it's called, is that one, it's all new, brand new tracks. Two, right, obviously we can see the art style is different and fun, but I just hope that it has a fun gimmick, right? Because I felt like, you know, the anti-grav gimmick was more for map design internally, but because we never really looked like we were upside down or anything, it never felt like it was impacting how we were playing too much, but it was cool, right? But I do hope this next gimmick is something more gameplay oriented, you know, something I can really feel like I'm doing, whether it's a damaging effect to an enemy, right? Whether it's unique card customization, whether it's new stuff like that. Like, I really do want that. And I know some people are opposed to this, but I do hope that this Mario Kart is one where there's like, I'm not saying we need a battle pass, but I hope there's events. You know, I do hope that, like, I constantly, besides, you know, just playing it for fun, I do hope there's constantly a reason to play this, you know, whether it's time trials or unique events or even like Splatfest, quote unquote, but Mario Kart styles, a better tournament system for online, you know, an actual rewarding ranking system would be really cool too. Like, I do hope the game has just stuff, you know, that, you know, gives you a reason to play the game a lot more. And again, the game's gonna have 24, you know, playable characters at once. I do hope that means we have a really big roster, right? I hope we get costumes in this. I hope we get a lot. Obviously, they're not gonna go into like the little details of Mario Kart 8 or 10, whatever. They'll probably, you know, make a unique direct for Mario Kart, which makes sense, but we will get a big trailer for it, and that'll be like, you know, the Switch. I think that release date will be the release date of the console, so that's either gonna kick off the presentation or end the presentation. Now, the next game obviously, I want to get this one out of the way. Metroid Prime 4, right? This is one that they've been, they showcased at the end of the last direct, I think, or the second to last direct, and it looks incredible, right? And I think this one is gonna be their big cross-gen launch. I think it's gonna release the same day on Switch 2's launch. That way you have Mario Kart for your fun game, and then you have Metroid for your hardcore game, right? And that one's gonna be, a dual release. I think it'll release on Switch 2 and Switch 1. I could see them doing something where like the Switch 1 edition maybe launches like a week or two later or something, maybe push it a little bit. But hey, I still think there's a chance they could probably launch it both on the same day, but have, the Switch 2 version be like the big graphical showcase, right? Because I think regardless, when you're buying Switch 2, you're going to be buying Mario Kart, and then you're probably, the hardcores are going to want to snag another game, and that'll be Metroid Prime, and it's going to look incredible. It probably is going to be way more mind-blowing than we even recognize. I think the area is going to be better, bigger, the gimmicks are going to be cool, but man, if it's going to look and play like anything I saw in that presentation, that game is going to be phenomenal. I have no doubt that they've taken their time and that Rare's been cooking like crazy to make something incredible here. All right, next up, I think this is also one that is going to blow some minds, and I don't think it's going to be day one, but it's going to be year one, and that's 3D Mario, right? This year, remember, is the 40th anniversary of the Mario franchise, and I know now, here's the thing. I know it's a big ask, truthfully, to get a new Mario Kart and a 3D Mario in the same year, but damn, bro, what would be a bigger celebration to 40 years of Mario than doing something like that? And I think it's ready. I think that game has been cooked in the lab and done for a while now, just kind of like how Odyssey was done for a while and they saved it for the fall. I think that's the case with this one, bro. We went 8 years without a brand new 3D Mario. Now, I know a lot of people are gonna be like, but Bowser's Fury. Bowser's Fury, small project made by a different team, like one of the side teams at EPD, but the mainline Odyssey never got any actual content updates besides Luigi's balloon and costumes. And so I don't even, as much as I love Odyssey and I always wanted a sequel to it, at this point I don't want one, right? Like at this point I'm like, I just want something new. You took your time. It's very clear you were okay with Odyssey 1 being the Mario game for the Switch, and so now I'm ready for something bigger and crazier, and I do hope it is bigger and crazier, and I hope honestly that it takes a page from Sonic Frontiers in a sense of I would love to see an open world Mario game, kind of like how they also experimented with Bowser's Fury, right? Where like you are just going to a massive, colorful, unique area, right? They have their gimmick. Maybe you can bring back the cape, right? So like if you run for a while, Mario can get some glides on in the air, get to some sky areas, which would be incredible. I think I don't know, mark my words, we're gonna see the cape in that next 3D Mario game. I don't know what it is that makes me think that, but my brain keeps telling me we're gonna see Mario run with that cape, fly into the sky, and get to some unique sky areas in that Mario game. But I think it's gonna be crazy. It's always hard to predict 3D Mario because Nintendo is genuinely psychotic and will do anything. But I'm sure it's gonna have moments like Bowser's Fury where you could be exploring and then enemies just spawn in front of you. I think they're gonna go for a open world Mario, but it's all about just joy and creativity. It's going to be about the creativity of the platforming in front of you, the stars you go collect, the things you do. Like, to me, that's such a different feel than something like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, where at the end of the day, those games are still hardcore and you have to scared of what's going to happen to you. You got to get resources. But with Mario, like, an open world playground is essentially like an incredible idea, and they could do some crazy stuff. And I think, yeah, that's going to be the big, at least holiday title, or, maybe late summer, September. But I think that's going to be the fall game. But of course, speaking, continuing going on the launch, right? I think Nintendo is probably going to have a gimmick game, right? They always seem to have at launch of their consoles the game that takes advantage of, what the new console does. So because the Switch 2 is going to have the mouse cons, I can see them doing something silly. I don't think they're gonna do 1-2 Switch ever again, but I could see them do something silly, like maybe a WarioWare. I've seen people throw around the idea that they deadass might drop Mario Maker 3 for the Switch launch. That way making levels is easier with the movement of the mouse. I don't know. I think that's wishful thinking. It'd be sick if they got a new Mario Maker going on, but I feel like we're not going to see Mario Maker for a minute. I feel like I'd like to see what's next for the Wonder Universe or potential sequel before we get, that internal, like whether, you know, before we get the wonder stuff in a brand new Mario Maker. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. But regardless, I think a gimmick game will be there. And whether it's a new IP or it's an established IP like a Nintendo Land 2, I would love a Nintendo Land 2, to be frankly honest with you. That would be, you know, the best outcome. But I do think, like, generally, one thing we will see here will be a new IP, right? I think, you know, for Switch, they tried ARMS as the announcement thing. For the Wii U, they got Splatoon. And not that ARMS is really big, but ARMS sold a few million copies, right? And I felt like it was disappointing that they didn't do more with it. But I do think regardless, Nintendo is probably going to want to try a new IP. And this one might not be one people are excited about, but it's probably something Nintendo is going to do. I'm feeling like they might try one of those battle royales. You know, I feel like now you could argue they did their take on battle royale with Tetris 99, right? Or even Mario 35. Like, they did a Nintendo-fied version of that. But I could see them, again, if they want to flex the online, making something bigger where you can build stuff together or do stuff. I don't know. Because they kind of have, like, fighting games covered. They have Mario games covered. I could see them maybe trying to cover an action game, right? And a new Nintendo first-party IP action game could be cool, you know, because maybe it's going to be Astral Chain 2. I don't know. But I see a new IP or some kind of action game potentially announced here. All right, another big prediction I have, and this is the one I genuinely hold near and dear to my heart and I think is going to happen, right? It's been a while, Mr. Sakurai, and he is going to pull up at this presentation, right? Now, I don't know if it's going to be Smash, Kid Icarus, or a new thing, but I really do believe that Sakurai will be at this first party event, right? I think, you know, he quote retweeted that Switch Direct when it was initially announced on his Twitter, being like, oh, look, this looks gonna be fun, right? And I feel like, and then literally Sakurai, when he ended his recent YouTube channel where he was posting much, then in his last video, he said that, oh yeah, by the way, this channel, all I ever did was I spent 3 months recording fucking literally a year's worth of content for you guys. And I've been working on the game for like the last 2 to 3 years when I built the team and everything. So, haha, and that's like the most Sakurai thing ever. Like, so he's a crazy person. And that's the big thing, is if Sakurai had to recruit a team for a game, you know, because obviously his company Sword Limited is his own, and he often works with contractors, people bringing in and out. I feel like it's not Smash. Not that he's not going to work on Smash, but I think that he is either doing Kid Icarus or he's doing another weird IP revival at Nintendo. What that could be, I don't know. Maybe he'll be in charge of Star Fox, which would be fucking awesome. I'd love something like that, you know, because that would have technically some DNA of Kid Icarus, right, where you have the air shooting parts, then you have some ground shooting. That'd be honestly sick. Like, I really do think Star Fox still has the potential to be one of Nintendo's biggest things if they really, like, lock the fuck in. You know, especially for those ground levels, you have a third-person shooter with maybe unique guns and weapons. But also, I do love Kid Icarus and would love that cast to come back for a second game. That'd be incredible if they did something like that. But yeah, Smash is obviously going to happen, whether we like it or not. But I don't know if we're going to have Smash announced year one. But I do think, like I said, Sakurai is going to be in this direct, mark my words. Another big one I could see here is Kirby, right? Kirby in the Forgotten Land came out in 2022, which is kind of crazy. This is going to be 3 years since the game came out. And, you know, they only did Return to Dreamland Deluxe internally there, but I'm sure they had a team working on the next one. I feel like it's time, right? I feel like whether they announce it and maybe it comes out, you know, August, September, or it comes out, you know, maybe early the next year, I do think it's time for Kirby. And I think Kirby's big enough now to warrant a spot in the first one. I mean, guys, people don't talk about this enough, but Kirby Forgotten Land sold like 7 million copies, right? Which is a huge amount of numbers. So I feel like if Nintendo is like, hey, we have a new Kirby game, it's probably, I think the next one's probably going to have online co-op too. I think they're going to emphasize that, more power-up upgrades, more bigger areas, you know, continue the 3D Kirby style. And yeah, that's another big one I could see. And of course, Donkey Kong, right? Donkey Kong is a big one that I feel like is going to be the big announcement of their next 3D platformer, right? Because look, we have that new redesign they did, right? For, you know, that looks like he looks different for the new Mario Kart. We have literally a DK theme park. Remember, a while back, there was rumors of a DK movie spinoff after movie's success. You know, we had Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, which Nintendo posts about 35 times. I'm not even joking. And I just think it's time, right? I think it's time for a new Donkey Kong game. And I could even see something crazy, right? Where the next mainline Mario is a Mario and Donkey Kong like journey together. Regardless, I don't know why. I just feel like this is the show that Donkey Kong is going to be in. And I feel like they want to push the character again in the spotlight because he deserves it. You know, a banger Donkey Kong game is a banger one. And we didn't get one during the Switch era. We got 2 HD remasters that were really good, but that's about it. But I do feel like it's time for the character to get some love. And I feel like if it was worked on by the Nintendo EPD team, the internal one, that would be incredible. And I don't know. There's something in my soul that tells me Donkey Kong is going to be getting a game here. And that's all I think about for first party. Like I said, it's going to be those projects I think are going to be announced. Potentially a new Fire Emblem. I could see that, you know, being a big graphical showcase for, you know, a strategy type game because the series is so popular and people love it. But that's going to be it for first party because I think it's going to be that. And, you know, obviously the upgrade system for 4K. Now, big question, right, before I get into some third party stuff is, are they going to announce their next console for Nintendo Switch Online, right? Are they going to bite the bullet and do GameCube? I could see it, right? Because if I'm saying that they're potentially going to do a third tier of Nintendo Switch Online, I think it will come with the 4K upgrades for games, but I think it'll also come with the next 2 gimmicks, console games for it, which will probably be GameCube, Nintendo DS, and they will announce that they are partnering with Sega for a Dreamcast NSO. Boom, mic drop. That's what I think is going to happen. All right, I don't know why, but that's what my heart of hearts is telling me. They worked with Sega. Why would they work with Sega just for Genesis? Like, I feel like that would be such a weird one-off relationship, right? We've seen even Sega talk about the fact that they want to potentially do a Sega subscription or something like that. And I feel like this is the best middle ground. You work with the guys that are most associated with you nowadays, right? Because when I get to the third party segment, I'm sure Sega is going to play a big part in it, and just work with them. So Dreamcast for NSO as well as GameCube, I think that's a sell, bro. I mean, that I'm upgrading, and I know you would too, bro. If they had a third tier to NSO, right? 4K upgrades, GameCube, Dreamcast, and then maybe DS coming down the line or whatever. Boom, that would be mega massive, and I would love that. I'm getting myself excited. Don't do that, Phil. Stop. Stop it. Stop. But of course, as I mentioned, Sega, we should get into some of the third parties, which, you know, for me is always the least exciting part because, yeah, I like third parties on Nintendo consoles, but I am playing them for Nintendo at the end of the day. But we might see a bit of a shift this time around because now we have a Nintendo console that's potentially going to be running, you know, games at 4K. At least we had the power of a PS4 Pro, which doesn't really mean much, you know, when we're about to be 8 years into PS5's life, right? And that console, you know, it will not 8 years. Sorry, that's a lot. You know, we're entering 5 years of the PS5. So at this point, PS4 Pro is like 9-year-old hardware, which is kind of crazy to think about. And so I think it's going to be in that weird territory where it'll still be powerful for third parties, but third parties are still, you know, dealing with their own shit. But alas, I think, you know, the obvious one is Final Fantasy, right? I think Square has been constantly nonstop talking about how FF7 remake, Rebirth underperformed and that they want to grow where those games go, right? And obviously they've had a push on PC, but I think they want Japan, right? And I think the reason why the FF games aren't selling as much as they want to is because, well, in Japan, the people that are buying on PS5 is not as big as Switch there. And so if they could get a game like FF7 running on Switch and doing an incredible work there, people are going to buy it. I mean, Dragon Quest 2D HD in Japan, that's like literally a sprite-based game. So like it was the best-selling game in Japan last year. It's crazy. It's actually crazy what that kind of console, what that kind of like audience draws into. And so if Square can get Final Fantasy on Nintendo Switch, that'll be huge, right? And I think Square is going to be a big part of this presentation. In fact, I think this will be where Square Enix debuts Dragon Quest XII's gameplay reveal, right? I think that's something a lot of people forget exists, right? Dragon Quest XI, I remember, was one of the first games announced to come out on the original Nintendo Switch. And so I could see this place being the big gameplay debut for Dragon Quest XI, which again, I cannot stress enough how huge that would be. Japan eats that up. But I think, you know, they have ties to Nintendo, they're associated with them, work with them on this, and boom, you have a match made in heaven, right? Another weird third-party company I think they're going to work with, and hear me out here, MiHoYo, right? I know this one is kind of like a right? But remember, literally 5 years ago, almost in a Nintendo Direct in Japan, they announced that Genshin Impact was coming to Nintendo Switch. And obviously, I think things scrapped, things moved on, and I think they all moved on to Nintendo Switch 2. And in fact, I think all the 3 major MiHoYo games will be announced for the Nintendo Switch. So I think they're gonna have a big trailer being like Zenless Zone Zero, Honkai Star Rail, and Genshin, all available on Nintendo Switch 2 day one, right? And they're gonna have, 60 FPS, it's gonna be good. They'll have your pre-order bonuses or whatever. Like, I think MiHoYo is gonna have a big push there. I don't know why, but there's something in me that tells me MiHoYo is gonna be the big push. Of course, you're gonna have your Western developers. I think we could see Baldur's Gate, right? 3 potentially running on the console. I think Doom, right? Doom the Dark Ages, we already got Doom Eternal and Doom 1 that released on Switch 1, so I don't see why they wouldn't, work with Bethesda to be like, boom, Doom 3 will also be running on Switch 2, as well as, potential other stuff, maybe Outer Worlds 2, or what's that new game that Avowed will be announced for it. Maybe they'll announce that Indiana Jones game will be running on. I could see something like that. There have been a lot of rumors of the Master Chief Collection getting a port, and I think this would be the biggest place to do it. If Microsoft pulled up to the Switch 2 saying, hey, we are happy to announce that in partnership with Nintendo, we are going to be porting the Master Chief Collection to Nintendo Switch 2. And that, again, would be mind-blowing. That would be, again, a huge third-party get. It's not too much work because those games are old games. Microsoft's probably already been working on it for a long time. And so I feel like it's the matter of when, not if. But if they want to make a big splash, this will be the place to do it. Now, the big question is GTA 6. Right? Will GTA 6 be here? I don't think so. I think that would be a detriment to Nintendo, if anything, right? I feel like GTA 6 is a game that appeals to so many like casuals, right? That like, I think, yes, it's okay if a GTA trailer is in a direct, but I feel like that's almost like a spotlight stealer from their own stuff. So people thinking like this is where the GTA 6 trailer 2 is going to be. I don't think so. I think GTA 6 trailer 2 will be, it'll have a day to its own and it'll take over the world. But as I mentioned, Split Fiction, right? I actually didn't mention, I don't know why I said that. Split Fiction, which is that big new game by Joseph Fares, I think will also be announced for Switch 2. Silk Song, is this where you're gonna be? Or is this the one? Silk Song, come on, right? Come on, right? It's been years, please. I'm hungry, man. Please just give me Silk Song. I'm begging you. Sega, right? Where do I begin with you? I feel like, again, Sega is gonna be one of the biggest supporters on Switch because the big one is gonna be Atlas, right? I think Atlas is gonna turn up here. I think they're going to announce a port of Metaphor, right? It'll be like the Metaphor Year 1 edition. They'll probably have some new story content like they always do, Metaphor Royal or whatever they want to call it, which will be really cool to have on Switch. And I do think, so 2 days ago, it was registered that P4RE domain was registered, which stands, for P4, because we got a P3RE, what's it called? Patent or whatever trademark 2 months before P3 Reload was announced. And so now people are thinking P4 Reload or Remake or Rewind or Retaped or whatever is going to be announced. And I could see it be announced here, that or Persona 6. I feel like people made such a big deal of the Persona games finally being announced for Nintendo consoles and actually making the jump as, an all studio game with Persona. I no longer think they have the chain to PlayStation. And so I think, yeah, Persona will be in this presentation, whether it is 6 or potentially this P4 remake. I don't know. I think Persona is going to be, or even, if they just announce P3 Reload is going to be running on the Switch. And obviously, I got to talk Sonic here. I'm sure Racing Crossroads is going to be here. Potentially, maybe that Heroes remake that was rumored. Okay, come on, I gotta get some Sonic in there somehow. Come on, bro, please just give it to me, bro. I'm greedy, bro. Please, man. Capcom, of course, long-running relationship with Nintendo. I could see them potentially porting Monster Hunter Wilds. I think one of the easiest ones they could do is port Street Fighter 6, right? Because Street Fighter 6 running on PS4 right now, base PS4, and so there's no reason that at this point they couldn't get Street Fighter 6 running on Switch 2. Hopefully they have some sort of online system where you can, transfer your save with an online account, because that'd be really good, because I have a lot of stuff in Street Fighter 6, and I hope I could carry that over to Switch 2, right? Obviously, I could see even Bandai here, you know, porting Tekken 8 to the Switch 2, right? Or even announcing Elden Ring. Elden Ring would be, I think Elden Ring is like the obvious one, right? You know, the game at this point is like, what, 4 years old. It's running on a PS4. Like, I feel like the game could easily run on Nintendo Switch 2. Probably not incredibly well, but it could definitely run at least on Nintendo Switch 2. And of course, the big third-party game that is going to be here no matter what, and it's going to be a big deal, is Call of Duty. If you guys remember, I think this was a year or two ago now, Microsoft announced a deal with Nintendo that they are going to be supporting Nintendo for 10 years of Call of Duty, and that has not come to fruition yet. Until now, right? I think they were waiting for the Nintendo Switch 2 to be announced for this to be a thing. And yeah, I think whether it's the next Call of Duty or ports of Modern Warfare or whatever the old one is, I think Call of Duty is going to be a big announcement here. It's going to be a big deal, right? Whether it's, you know, whether it runs well or looks good or whatever, completely different question. But I do think, you know, they're still making Call of Duty games that are running on PS4, right? And so I don't see any reason why they can't get, you know, over then. That's my biggest hope. My biggest hope is that, yes, I understand PS5 and PC and all that will always be the best way to play a third-party game online, but I'm hoping that this time around, the big difference is that if I buy a third-party game on Switch 2, now that we're at least at PS4 Pro levels of power, that I could play like Street Fighter 6 on Switch and feel fun. You know, that I could play Fortnite on Switch and not feel like I'm looking at a N64 game upscaled, right? That I feel like I can play these third-party games with people without it being like, okay, I'm clearly playing the shittier version. That's it. But yeah, that was a lot of information and thoughts out there. But yeah, we are so close to the event. I cannot wait to live react. I cannot wait to talk about it once it's in, once it's out, and everything. And of course, I would love to know in the comment section below, what are your predictions? What are your hopes? What do you think is going to be there? Am I being crazy? Am I being too safe? Do you got better ideas? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank y'all for watching. I love you. And of course, I will see you all next time. Peace out.